The subject for the 1973 conference at Eastbourne was strategy for sustained profit growth. The discussions at the conference centered around the concern 5-year plan, which was built up from individual company plans, which many of you played a part in making. Before the conference, those taking part had studied an outline of the concern plan. The purpose of the conference discussions was to make recommendations on what must be done to achieve the objectives of this plan. They discussed the problems that face us and how these are to be overcome. This film doesn't attempt to tell the whole story of the conference or the conclusions reached, but rather to convey to those who were not present something of its atmosphere and the way the Special Committee and the Board seek to consult top management about concern policy. Eastbourne, in England, June 1973. Delegates are arriving for one of the most important Unilever conferences.
Good morning, how are you?
Mr. Kleinstra, chairman of NV, arrives, obviously enjoying some English weather. Mr. David Orr, a vice chairman of Limited. And Sir Ernest Woodruff, chairman of Limited. The atmosphere was easy and relaxed as the delegates met, but after lunch, the serious business of the conference began.
Our last conference of top management was in the Hilton Hotel, Rotterdam, in November 1970. Everybody tells us it was a success, and we think so too. What was the secret of that success? Well, first, because the performance and the problems of Unilever were presented for all to see, and the performance was not good. Secondly, because the message from the figures was clear. We were earning too little profit and using too much money to do so. We'd pursued growth in sales volume at the expense of growth in profit. We'd allowed our profit margins to fall. We'd been slow to react to the accelerating rate of inflation. Our planning was unrealistic and over-optimistic. It was clear from what was said in syndicate discussions and in the plenary session that everyone was convinced of the action that had to be taken. Better discipline in the management of cash. More emphasis on profit and somewhat less on sales volume. The need to raise prices, the need to cut costs, the need to dispose of unprofitable businesses. Planning had to be on the basis that objectives are for achievement. Well, having listened to what you all had to say, I said, note my words, this conference could mark a turning point for the business. It did. Our recovery and achievement is in part a measure of the success of the Rotterdam Conference. In 1972, our profit margin and our yield on capital employed, as published in the report and accounts, were higher than in any year since the war. Can we keep it up? Having achieved much, how can we achieve more? Volume suffered in 1971 as we concentrated on improving profitability and disposed of some of our unprofitable units. But we moved back into growth in 1972, and at 3.75% growth in volume, excluding the effect of acquisitions, were ahead of the average of about 3.25% for the previous 10 years. In the next 5 years, the concern plan calls for a 4.5% per annum growth in volume, and at higher margins than we've been able to achieve during these past 2 years. a task that will stretch our abilities to the full. But we should be in better shape to meet the challenge as a result of the changes in organization, in planning, and industrial policy during these 2.5 years. The title of the Rotterdam Conference was Improving Current Profitability. This time we are to discuss strategy for sustained profit growth. The difference in emphasis is significant. Then we were looking at the problem of short-term recovery and setting ourselves on a new course. Now Unilever in total has indeed recovered. We've gone a long way to achieving what we set out to do at Rotterdam. What we're setting out to do now is to get a sustained, long-term profit growth of 9% per annum without the ups and downs of the past. And I feel I must stress sustained profit. The downs of the past were not planned. They were failures to achieve plans. Had we succeeded instead of failed, we would have had a proud record of profit growth in the 1960s instead of near stagnation. Well, I'm convinced that we've moved to higher ground and that there'll be no slithering downwards. But the way ahead is not easy, and the task is more difficult than the short-term recovery we staged in 1971 and 72. In the first place, because we run into the problem of diminishing returns for our efforts. We've creamed off the easy stuff. And secondly, because of the unprecedented rise in raw material costs in 1973, first year of the plan. Finally, we must recognize that the world has become a more hostile place for us. Many facets of this hostility are brought out in the syndicate papers. Continuing inflation, ever more severe price controls, militancy of labor, intractability of redundancy problems, intensification of consumerism, excesses of some demands of the environmentalists, distrust of the multinational company, moves to union negotiations on a multinational basis, a formidable list of problems ahead of us. But again, that's what this conference is all about. How can we live with these trends and yet improve our performance? To achieve our objectives, we'll certainly need a high level of innovation. We'll need to cut costs drastically. We'll need even more effective deployment of our marketing skills than hitherto. Well, we look forward to hearing your ideas of how we should go about it. Thank you.
At this point, immediately after Sir Ernest Woodruff's introduction, the conference of some 150 delegates split up into syndicates to discuss 6 subjects which the Special Committee considered to be of particular current importance. Pressures on marketing, more profit from innovation, pricing policy, developing better management, do we use internal and external expertise properly, and cost. Discussion on these subjects occupied the syndicate on Monday evening and all Tuesday until late afternoon, when the syndicate reports were completed and made available to all the delegates. Each report had meanwhile been read by the Special Committee and considered with the chairman of the syndicates concerned, before open discussion at the plenary session the following day. We recorded part of the Special Committee's meeting with the chairman of 2 syndicates on the subject of cost, Mr. Rogers, the Unilever pension officer, and Mr. Veerstrata from Union Merksem in Belgium.
There should be a commitment to specific cost savings in the annual estimates and then even in the 5-year plan. And people should be committed to this and should monitor it.
I'm surprised that people haven't got it yet in the companies. say, well, this year we wanted to save 2 billion francs or 100,000 marks. It was a need to specify it. It wasn't there.
It is not true, I think, to say that people do not have any of it yet.
But not.
Of course, there are some programs, but in our group we realized very strongly that a highly increased effort will be necessary here. And that's why we thought that this will need involvement throughout the whole lines of management, and that this involvement should start with interest being shown from the very top.
Yeah.
And that this interest should be shown by introducing some sort of formal ways of reporting.
The meeting then discussed the need for more investment in labour-saving machinery and the importance of taking full account of the effects of wage inflation when making decisions of this kind. This was something the Special Committee wanted to discuss in plenary session the following day.
Now we've got 4 subjects which are going to take more than the time, so we really have to decide which one was the reserve. I was thinking this last one was the reserve. I think it probably is, isn't it?
I think
yes,
so.
I think you must have in the one on cost saving, investment and cost saving, you have to have it in. Or control of the layers of management, was that, those Velop's group, yes. Yes,
That's
the last group.
That's rather difficult
That's
to...
reserve here and the other.
So, after meetings with the chairman of all the syndicates, the Special Committee agreed on the broad areas to be covered at the plenary session. Here, any aspect of the 6 subjects was to be discussed, whether it was covered by the syndicate papers or not, with each man speaking for himself. The Special Committee, as Sir Ernest had said in his introduction, were there to listen.
Well, now we come on to the problem of cost, in which we've achieved extraordinarily good results during the past 2 or 3 years. And the question is, how can we improve even further? And we first want to take the point that people should be asked to state clearly what their savings objectives are, and then they should be monitored and they should be held to them. And I'll ask Mr. Longhurst to introduce that subject.
Chairman, gentlemen, you'll have seen from our particular syndicate paper, of course, that we were confident that we could reach this enormous target figure defined in the brief. But we made 2 rather important provisos. First, that the approach be systematic, and secondly, that we must achieve a total motivation, dedication of the organisation towards cost saving. Our syndicate believes that we should commit ourselves to such formal approaches by including cost-saving programs properly quantified in the annual planning cycle and annual estimate of 5-year planning procedures. This, in turn, will enable us, our management groups, and in due course the concern as a whole, to monitor progress against the overall target of the business.
The other group took a rather different approach to this, whilst acknowledging the need to get savings. So I'll ask Mr. Bisdee to speak to that.
Chairman, the boards of our operating companies are perfectly able to start and run their own profit improvement programs of all kinds. Now, we don't underestimate the help of specialists or outside consultants if they have a special technique to offer. We're not too proud to take advice. What we do say is, don't clutter up our plans with unnecessary detail. Let Unilever trust its units to get on with the job. When they succeed, and they will succeed, they will be only too happy to report their savings, and with them useful hints and tips for others to follow. They will do this the more readily when the initiative is seen to come from them and their own managers.
We'll now have 2 views on this. One, commitment to a definite programme of savings. The other one, which is a general commitment to profit. Bill Mann, yes.
I don't think in the paper that we put in that commitment was intended to be something that was forced upon companies on savings programs they didn't initiate. the initiative most certainly needs to come from the company. They must identify, we believe, where their best prospects for savings lie. But it is the act of commitment and then to report against their progress in achieving that target that we believe is the important step in a management attitude.
Fine, thank you. Let's go on to the next subject in cost saving, and this is one that we have certainly felt some time, that we get too little investment in labour-saving machinery, and do we really approach this problem in the proper way? And I'll ask Mr. May to open this discussion.
Mr. Chairman, the massive productivity increases which we will have to make over the coming 5 years make it necessary to give a strong stimulation to this labour-saving investment. And we think that it is necessary to have some novel and positive action applied to that. We recommend to, first of all, identify such projects separately in our capital expenditure programs. Furthermore, to issue special guidelines as to the yield required for these projects. We think that this yield requirement should be very low indeed, and that even all projects with any yield at all in this sector, under the present circumstances, should seriously be considered and can, in principle, be attractive. On the one hand, labor-saving investments strengthen permanently the very base of our existing business. Cost to the company of employed labor will rise dramatically, both in a tangible and in an intangible way. Mostly cost savings are conservatively estimated. Risk in these projects is practically nil.
And then Mr. Boer wanted to contribute on this particular topic.
But our syndicate also felt that because the one thing in life that's almost totally certain is that labour costs will rise rapidly over time, this is risk-free or almost risk-free investment, and that therefore the yield criterion should be set much lower than for other kinds of investment. But I think the final point we would stress is that it's no good just generally laying down a policy like this. It really has got to be communicated right down the line to those people who initiate thinking about labour-saving investment. If it isn't understood that the criteria are different for labour-saving investment, then a great many projects may be strangled in the grassroots before.
The whole subject of cost saving was something the conference had much to say about, and Mr. Caron and Mr. Sweetman, Mr. Nitchman and Mr. Travaglia all stressed different aspects of the problem of maintaining impetus, from examining the structure of the business to effective use of management time.
Training should be given in running meetings effectively, and also as an input for the meetings in writing reports in a more concise and standard way, always starting with conclusions or recommendation and fixing a limit in number of words of space. All this should become a matter of our management style.
Fine. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you all for your contribution. We have had it recorded, so all your words of wisdom have been taken note of, and a special committee will see a verbatim report of the whole thing, and we will study it and take action.
The plenary session, which occupied the whole of the last morning, had covered all 6 subjects discussed by the syndicates. In less than half an hour after the session had ended, the conference entered its final stage, with Mr. Kleinstra ready to begin his summing up of the contributions from the floor.
Why this conference, ladies and gentlemen, which is now drawing to its end? Was it that the board and special committee felt like in the Rotterdam Hilton Conference, in addition of wanting to have your views and recommendations, that they had an urgent message to convey to you? No, this time the conference was primarily held to get your views, your suggestions and recommendations for action. But the aim is that overall we will show a sustained increase in profits of 8 to 9% per annum. it is on how to achieve this that we wanted your recommendations. And at the same time, we hoped that you would feel that the plan is realistic. And it's only if you feel that we can achieve it that it is become realistic. Can I now come to the 6 subjects which you have been discussing in your syndicates, for each of which a special paper was written. All the subjects have an important bearing on the plan, although perhaps the most dramatic ones are those directly concerned with growth and margins. Now, the first subject we discussed was pressures on marketing. We are under pressure from governments, consumer movements, environment, trade, competition, media, and perhaps even more. And you felt that we must equip ourselves better to meet these challenges. One thing is clear, that the power of the trade is something which is of the greatest possible importance if we want to try to keep up or increase sales. On the other point, contacts with governments, consumers, etc., it becomes quite clear that the time is long past when we could say, I'm running my business to hell with the rest of the world. It is now an essential part of the business, and particular of the very senior executives of the business, that they have to spend a lot of time with these external matters. We have to realize that this is an integral, essential part of our business. The next point is then on greater success and more profit through innovation. I think what your recommendations and conclusions in general were, that we have to seek change, but at the same time we must be able to accept change. There's an attitude of mind and commitment right from the top that change is essential, and not change for the sake of change, but change for improvement if we want to achieve our plans. It is more important to be committed to have the philosophy right than to think of modern techniques on innovation. It was stressed again by some people and was accepted by you that the receiving, the willingness to receive and to use the ideas is a very important matter as well, and this should again be encouraged right from the top. Well, then we came to the next subject, that was, I think, profit from pricing. I don't think there was much disagreement that it is a terribly important matter. In this respect, I would like to say that it came out in other areas as well, that in this whole area of price and volume relations and so on, there are some very excellent reports and studies, but this is one area where we seem still to fail in our communications. It shows again how important it is that the experience we have in Unilever, the studies we have, are being utilized and not just put away. The next one was then developing better management. Again, I think perennial or appraisal and weeding out the poor performers ought to be improved, and I think we have been hearing that for some time now, and really I think it is about time we are getting a bit more serious on it, and not 85% of our people are good average number threes. I think that all of you might next time you do an appraisal, you really make an effort of be completely honest with yourself and with your managers. There's the other point, and that is, in order to get better performance, we must really make it damn clear to all of you, your colleagues, that the strategy is being fed down the line, so that everybody is aware of what her committed plans are, and try in some way or another that they feel they are involved in the plan, even in a small way. Well, I think we then come to costs. Very large cost reductions are necessary. But I didn't hear from the conference that you say, well, forget it, we won't achieve it. Fortunately, you felt that the opportunity was there. Now, we expect from you this year a saving of X. And this is part of the plan for the year, so that everybody feels necessity and have it in his mind every day, every week, every month, that he has to produce so many savings, or so much of savings in his department, in his company, in his sales organization, etc. I think we were in fair agreement. I really don't think that John Bisbee disagreed. He is doing exactly the same, of course, but he doesn't want to have it formalized in a 5-year plan. And there is a lot to say that we mustn't formalize it too much, as long as each company quite clearly sets targets for cost saving into smaller parts. It is, in my view, a note which came out clearly. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is what I try to say as a summing up of the 6 things you have been discussing. We have really observed this great pleasure that all of you felt that this 5-year plan is to be realized. And I have to warn you that if we're going to achieve this, steady, sustained profit growth, it does not just need strict discipline and determination. You will have to take now and then very unpleasant and awkward decisions. Sometimes you have to take them yourselves, and sometimes these decisions will be conveyed to you from coordinations of the relevant directors, and which might then, for some companies, cause you to have to modify your plans. Now, what we had hoped from this conference, that you would come out with some recommendations for action, which we could then utilize and could spread further, and we've got them. Some is the action to be taken by the board and the special committee, but some of the actions, recommendations for actions which you made today, you can act upon straight away when you go back to your company or department. And if we act on these recommendations, I feel that this Eastbourne Conference will have been as successful as the Rotterdam Conference.
After Mr. Kleinstra's summing up, the special committee held their final meeting at Eastbourne. Decisions were taken on which recommendations should be implemented, and the general feeling and direction of the conference was reviewed.
I think we've got a sense of commitment to the plan and to the objective of sustained profit growth. But of course the important thing is not just that the people that were at the conference should be involved, but that everybody else should be involved right down the line.
Well, that is the whole object what we are doing now, and that is to make sure that now everybody feels committed to this plan, not only the participants, but all of senior management.
When Ken Durham was talking about the getting strategy down the line, he was making the same sort of point, that it's quite useless if only the small group at the top are involved. We must get involvement not only with the commitment to the plan, but also the details of the strategy.
And I think you'll find that when people go back to their units, convey the message in the conference, that will get conveyed down the line clearly, because the planning now that we've got objectives clearly spelled out, and now that people realize that the objectives have got to be achieved, I think they'll be very receptive to hearing the strategy and to the communication process now.
I think we had confirmation that although everybody realizes there are plenty of problems ahead, they're not too dispirited by it and feel that we can overcome them.
No, but there is a bit of a danger of if you're not careful, of complacency. We have 2 years where everybody put up a first-class performance, and each year it becomes a little bit more difficult to improve your profits, improve your efficiency, and therefore an extra effort is needed.
Obviously going to be extremely difficult over the next few years. We're going to have more and more government interference. Clearly we're going to have price control, as we've got now in so many countries. We're going to have to live with price control. More concern for the consumer, strong trade unions who are going to have to be considered at every stage. So we can't be complacent. It's no pushover at all. It's going to be a very tough plan to achieve.
And there is the other feature, of course, to it, that quite apart from the relations with government, with the consumerist associations, so on, the problem of the increasing power of the trade.
We shouldn't overemphasize the fact that the trade is getting stronger. Sure, they're getting more sophisticated. We are going to have better people servicing the trade. But I don't think that this should be a great danger to our profitability. The interests of the trade are by and large similar to our own. There are ways we can work together with the trade to get efficiencies in distribution and so on.
The other feature that came out, because we're talking really now onto the problem of margins, is the question of pricing, which is one of the most difficult areas to understand, and one does feel that it came out from the discussion that we have to have far more attention to pricing than we have in the past. Wouldn't you think so, Herr?
Well, I found this a very useful part of the session, because there was a sort of feeling that perhaps we were tending to have a safe price, to be in the middle, and not really be a bit more courageous here and there, and try to be price leader and do a bit more in this field. And at the same time, it is the essential factor if we want to increase our profits steadily. You can't afford not to increase your prices, at least with your increased costs. So it is a direct...
And that's why it must be the responsibility of senior management.
Very senior.
You can't delegate it to someone down the line. It needs constant review, constant study, and it was interesting to see that many of the companies have got a scientific approach. They're measuring on price elasticities, and are studying this in a much more careful way, and it's being done by top management as it must be.
Yes, indeed. There were one or two cases mentioned where it was felt that the recommendations came up from too low a level, but I think everybody, of course, has to be involved in the problem of price increases.
Of course, you can't have general directions there. It varies with your market share, your position in the market, your type of industry, and so on. But on the whole, the feeling was we might take a bit more courage in our hands and see whether we can't get here and there a bit better pricing for new products, etc.
I think this brings us on to the problem of new products and innovation, because this is one way to get our margins up.
You can only charge what the product's worth, and if you give it an innovation, you can get your price up and get a better margin.
There must be a more systematic and methodical approach to it, but that was only half the problem. The other problem was the attitude of mind, and this seemed to be an area where people are not really convinced that within Unilever there is the right attitude of mind to innovation and risk-taking.
It has to be running through everything that the company does, its methods as well as its product development. And you can see, of course, without mentioning companies, we've got some companies where there has been a very innovative approach running right through the company, and those companies have done well and come up with the new product ideas.
Well, there does seem to be within the group of people there a feeling that we're not sufficiently receptive to new ideas, and as you say, David, there have been a lot of ideas in the business that have not been exploited, and so it may be that our receptivity, our acceptance for change is not enough.
With us, because sometimes when we're sitting around the table and someone brings a new idea, and we don't reject new ideas, but sometimes we do tend to be a little bit detailed in our criticism, and perhaps it may scare an occasional new idea, so perhaps we've got to be careful about this as well.
Well, I think this applies down the line, you know. It's very difficult to get through the big brigadier crust in the business.
Yeah, and another point that came out, it is not so much that we must develop new techniques or systems to get innovation more actively. It is a commitment, it's everybody's job. You don't hire chaps and say, you are my innovator. Every manager has to continuously look out, can I do anything better?
Yeah. And it's not just a marketing chap.
I thought this was a very important part, and there was not much disagreement. This is an area where we can improve.
Yes.
Clearly.
I would agree. Sure.
Attitude of mind again.
Yeah. The other part of the margins is the cost saving, and
yes, indeed. We did touch on that earlier. I think that the job that the boys have done is really absolutely superb. It's going to be difficult, and as Gerrit was saying earlier, we've got to be very careful that we don't get too complacent about it. And I don't think we have to be either. We can take either approach that was suggested in the plenary session. Remember, there was one man who said what we should do is everybody should have a program of savings, and the reply was, well, you just tell us what profit you want, what cash you want, and leave us to make the savings in order to get that. I think you can take it away, as long as within the company you have a discipline. Within the company you have a discipline.
Yeah. I don't think the two really disagree on that thing. I am personally in favor of giving each departmental manager and so a target. And say, now you, in discussion, and not tell him a figure which is not realistic, but after agreeing, can you save so much in your department during this year? Then you get the involvement, the dedication, and so on, and therefore you get target setting for
which is monitored. This is the important thing. That people then come back half yearly and say, well, my target was 500,000 saving. I've got 350,000, and I think I see another 100,000, and I'm going to have to push very hard.
The plus is that you are being made aware of it permanently, as it were, continuously. It is not something
that you just do, we're going to save costs in this factory and then forget about it.
Aren't we rather back to where we started? That the great thing is that we must get commitment. We get commitment to a profit target, you get commitment to a target for savings, and that with a proper change in the attitude of mind within the business, of greater acceptance, the need for innovation, for risk, that with commitment to that, to a plan, we really should be able to succeed.
What you have just seen is half an hour out of 2 days, a small part of the total picture of the Eastbourne Conference. Nevertheless, we hope it has given you a feeling of the commitment of those present to the achievement of the plan. The Special Committee and the Board would like this film to be seen as a background to your company plan for the next 5 years.